The fun's just getting started. And we begin tonight with major breaking news, 7 p.m. at Mar-a-Lago and in New York City. The president-elect could soon be returning to the Big Apple in a matter of days for sentencing in the Stormy Daniels business records case. Why even the judge who hates Trump admits there's nothing he can do. Also tonight, Donald Trump has passed his first real leadership test before returning to office. House Speaker Mike Johnson will retain the gavel after receiving Trump's blessing. And with that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television. First tonight, corporate America is still totally tone deaf. It's very clear America sent a message in 2024 of a return to patriotism and of American exceptionalism, a message that most Americans believe. Something along the lines of, we're not as tough as we once were. And today, yet again, we report facts. You can decide whether you like them or not. Today was a banner day for President-elect Donald Trump. The judge seeking to jail him rolled over. The Democrats hoping to undermine his influence in Congress failed. Corporate America, though, it seems to be the last one taking note of these major changes in America. Disney-owned ESPN made it abundantly clear for us, one day after a terrorist attack in New Orleans, the broadcaster didn't show the national anthem or the moment of silence for the victims in New Orleans, in the city in which the attack happened. And it was a moment Americans wish they could have seen. It was before the game. Here's the version from WSB TV in Atlanta. Video was taken by a good buddy of mine, Zach Klein, as a matter of fact, great reporter. The All-State Sugar Bowl has never been postponed or moved in its 91-year history, but it was this year, after the deadly terror attack carried out by a suspected ISIS sympathizer. Yet ESPN didn't think it was worth showing the national anthem after what happened just a mile away from the stadium. The broadcaster, however, did decide, probably because they got paid to show this 30-second message from Allstate's CEO. You decide what you think of the message after this.
Our prayers are with the victims and their families. We also need to be stronger together by overcoming an addiction to divisiveness and negativity. Join Allstate working in local communities all across America to amplify the positive, increase trust, and accept people's imperfections and differences.
That's something you'd hear after a fight between opposing fans on Bourbon Street. Let's be clear. An ISIS terrorist killed 15 people in the French Quarter, and Allstate's CEO used a 30-second commercial in the first half of the game, their moment to lecture the country about divisiveness and negativity. Feels a little bit like 2020. To be fair, we asked Allstate CEO Tom Wilson to join us tonight. In shocking news, he declined. We did get this statement from the company's press person. To be clear, Allstate CEO Tom Wilson unequivocally condemns this heinous act of terrorism and violence in all forms. The reference to overcoming divisiveness and negativity reflects a broader commitment to fostering trust and positivity in communities across the nation. This isn't just about ESPN or Allstate. It's about a group of, and I'll put it in air quotes, leaders, but they are CEOs, that refuse to move on from the past, that refuse to realize what the majority of Americans want to hear. Trump ran on a return to patriotism, and Americans agreed in sending him back to the White House. For some reason, corporate America either doesn't get it or doesn't want to get it. We begin tonight with NewsNation senior political contributor George Will, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post. George, I put leaders in air quotes, and I don't think I have ever seen a group of cowards quite in the way of Bob Iger and Mr. Wilson at Allstate. But Why is there this moment in American history that they refuse to acknowledge?
Leland, they're the last to learn, but they are learning. They really are. Look, if you're head of the U.S. widget manufacturers company, you know everything in the world about widgets and you're really good at it, but you're not so good at the rest of the world and the rest of life. But they're catching up. All over the country, companies are retreating from the diversity, equity, inclusion, woke agenda, where they were supposed to have a sort of racial spoil system in allocating jobs and investments and all the rest. One industry after another, John Deere, how American can you get? Walmart, they're all retreating from this. In part, Leland, because conservative lawyers are on the case. They're saying, we had a civil rights movement in this country for decades that said you shall not allocate the rewards of life on the basis of race. And they're taking them to court. They say when you have an intern program restricted to people of a particular race, that's against equal protection of the laws. It's against civil rights laws, hard written into law over tremendous opposition. So, as I say, the private sector is sometimes the last to learn, but they're learning and they're catching up.
You could argue they're learning because of the law. Politics is always downstream of culture. Andrew Breitbart said that. I think you and I have talked about that. But there was a time, right, where in 2017, probably through about 2022, right, it was quite in vogue to be against anything Donald Trump was for. It sort of didn't matter what it was. He wanted to build a wall. No, there can't be a wall. Walls are racist. He wants to run for president again. No, we're going to have to indict him in multiple jurisdictions. Culturally, that seems to have fallen off in America. Will it change in the corporate culture, or does that corporate elite still find the resistance, if you will, appealing at Hampton's cocktail parties?
Your complaint with corporate America, and it's well taken, and it is right, is that they have their ear to the ground. Well, you know, it's hard to look up to people who have their ear to the ground, but it's useful for corporate America to be going where the wind is blowing. And the wind is blowing like a gale force against the hysteria that enveloped the country. As you say, it started in 2016 and 2017, but it reached an apogee in 2020 with the George Floyd killing in Minneapolis. Some people trying to capitalize on this said the misbehavior of some Minneapolis police represented the moral and structural failing of the United States of America. And they used this skillfully, if I think perversely, to stampede the country into a feeling of tremendous guilt about its basic values. In the midst of this, corporate America buckled and truckled and surrendered. But when the wind changes, those who are blown about by the wind change with it. And so in a sense, Leland, your complaint about the corporate America is also the saving grace. They go with the wind, but when the wind changes, and the wind has changed, they're going to change too.
The wind blowing pretty hard, I think, could come from, in some ways, Donald Trump. Here he is talking just a couple of weeks ago about what you said in terms of wokeness and at all where it's going.
And woke has to stop. Because along with everything else, it's destroying our country. We're going to stop woke. Woke is bullshit.
Bob Iger of Disney made $31.6 million last year, in large part peddling woke. Is there a time that they decide, and I think you're speaking to this, right? But where does being woke become bad business, and is that more important to Bob Iger and CEOs like him, Tom Wilson of Allstate, than being accepted in their Aspen Ideas Festival cadre?
It becomes bad business, Leland, shortly after it becomes bad politics. It became bad politics on November 5th last year. What the country rose up and said is, we're tired of being told by the government and by the great and the good and the tone setters of America that they don't like the food we eat. They're very disappointed in our choices in cars, and our use of pronouns is disgusting. And the country said on November 5th, get out of our face. We're just tired of being lectured. We want to get on with life. And that was to my mind, that is the great unstressed story of the last election, is we're just not going to be lectured.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's
anymore.
why we did the segment, right? Which is that you now have two CEOs, and you think about this moment, right? Bob Iger was a producer at ABC. He understands what you're talking about. It's just that he doesn't seem to want to embrace it. And what is the force that is more powerful for Allstate's CEO and for Bob Iger to not pick up the phone after the terror attack and go, we are going all in on the national anthem. We are going all in on patriotism. Allstate's going to offer scholarships for the kids of those who were killed. Disney and ESPN are going to go all in on patriotism for the opening of the Sugar Bowl. I just can't figure out if what you're saying is true, which I believe it is. What force would stop the CEOs from doing that?
Well, remember, as I've been trying to say, Leland, the CEOs are not a leading indicator. They're a lagging indicator of America. But they are an indicator. They are, if nothing else, quite attuned to market forces. And the market is speaking. The market in politics has spoken. The market in commercial relations with Allstate and with Disney and all the rest, they'll catch up. You just watch.
Well, we will see how prophetic those words prove. Your words have proved that way in the past. Mr. Will, welcome to 2025. It's always good to see you, sir.
Good to be with you, Leland.
The internet has some truly wacky theories for why a Green Beret killed himself and then blew his truck up at the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Why some of the craziest theories might actually be close to the truth. Live pictures of both Las Vegas and New Orleans. There's Vegas. New Orleans is getting back to normal after an ISIS terrorist killed 15. Hard to imagine you say that, it just rolls off the tongue. And in Las Vegas, the story of a Green Beret shooting himself and then blowing up a Tesla Cybertruck keeps getting stranger and stranger. But the internet has all sorts of explanations for the death of Matthew Leifelsberger. Matt loves the Tesla Cybertruck, and a huge Trump fan. He drives to Las Vegas and blows himself up in front of Trump Towers. Matt's passport survives, not buying it. Green Beret military bomb expert, yet he used amateur explosives. Did someone put his corpse in the car? Remember, the car is fully self-driving. Next idea. Now that we know the Vegas suspect was found with a bullet in his head, I see two possible scenarios. One, he shot himself. He was planning to commit suicide, didn't want to risk being burned alive. Two, he was shot by someone else, and the Tesla was autopilot navigated to the Trump Hotel. In fact, Elon Musk shot down that one, saying that you cannot drive to the hotel with a corpse inside. Quote, autopilot will not function unless it detects an attentive person in the driver's seat. Dead people don't count, evidently. So the conspiracy theories out there now about Vegas are wacky, pure and simple. And there's even some crazier ones that we didn't even want to share about why he killed himself and what he knew and what the government was doing. Lord knows the disinformation police are very worried about the conspiracy theories. Today, the FBI and local authorities held another press conference trying to tell us what really happened in Vegas.
The second question is how are we able to explain the detonation versus the suicide? And we just believe it to be simultaneous at the time of the detonation. Very difficult to see inside of those Teslas, even with the camera angles that we have. And so we still remain challenged on finding some of that exact timing on all of that.
Okay, so that's the local sheriff in Vegas. We want to believe officials, right? We want to be able to believe the FBI and local law enforcement. We need to believe them. There's going to be times that it's really important. But the federal authorities are the same people who told us you couldn't get COVID if you got the vaccine, same people who told us Hunter Biden's laptop was a Russian plot, the same people who told us on New Year's morning that the guy with an ISIS flag driving through Bourbon Street and killing 15 wasn't a terrorist. All the same folks. In case you missed that, Here is the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge on New Year's morning.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if this is a viable device or not.
Tim Gallagher, former FBI Special Agent in charge of the Washington and Newark field offices, with us. Our segment last night, Tim, about the FBI, the problems in it, highest rated segment of the night, one of the highest rated segments we've ever done. So I think it's something that really strikes a chord with people about how they don't trust right now the FBI, the problems at the FBI because of what we just saw and what we've seen in the past. ... I think there's even a bigger danger, right, which is that it allows all the conspiracy theories, which can be really dangerous and that aren't true, to grow.
The question being, like, trust in the FBI? Trust,
well, I guess the question being, how do you A, restore trust, but B, put the genie back in the bottle at times now of protecting people from acting on the sort of wild stuff they see on the internet in the vacuum that is credible information from the FBI?
You build trust with the American public by waking up every day and protecting the Constitution, locking up bad guys, keeping people safe. So the FBI is out on the streets of New Orleans right now, putting together the crime scene, making sure there's no one else involved in this. And they will continue to do that like they've done for the last 110 years.
So do you see the problem with the Assistant Special Agent in charge getting up and saying, hey, this isn't terrorism, when everybody could see with their own two eyes that it was? And do you not understand how that then breeds people looking on the internet and going, gee, I need to find the truth because the FBI isn't telling me?
Yeah, as far as what she said that morning, internally, the FBI is going to treat every attack like that as a terrorist attack until you prove that it's not, right? You work it as a terrorist attack, and you put together the case, and the fact that it's terrorism is going to be what the specific intent was. Why did this person go out there and kill them, right? So you're working the case. It was too early to come out and say this is not a terrorist attack. Just say we're out here, we're working the scene. We're assisting local law enforcement, working side by side. We go out, our hearts go out to the victims here. This is an awful scene, and we're going to put this together, and we're going to get to the truth and just leave it at that.
Where is the danger, right? And I think there is one, of this lack of trust. And I think people are right to now be skeptical of what sort of establishment experts, the federal government, tells us. Favorability drops among Americans, 50% to 41%. You don't regain trust by telling 59% of Americans that they're wrong. Again, what is the danger of the conspiracy theory suddenly, I don't want to say taking flight, but gaining more and more credibility?
Sure, that's always a danger. Like, the FBI deals in evidence, they deal in facts. Conspiracy theories don't. They just take one sliver of something that's true and then expound upon it to make it seem like it could be possible, right? And so the FBI needs to stay one step ahead of that, and probably, better messaging, not being afraid to come out publicly with information. Sometimes they'd be holding back. Use that information, get that out there to the American public so they know exactly what's going on. Of course, you have an ongoing investigation. You have to be careful with the information that you're allowing to get out, that you're putting out there. But sometimes it's absolutely necessary to keep the trust of the American public who you're defending every day.
Are you seeing a change, right? Christopher Wray is going to be on his way out. What is the appetite inside the FBI? And I'm wondering if there is not a feeling among a lot of agents who I believe to be good people who wear the badge every day, put their life on the line, are investigating gangs and drugs at real danger. What is the appetite for them for changes in leadership and change in focus, maybe away from some of the social change and social justice that the FBI seemed to focus on the past 4 years?
Well, the mission of the FBI hasn't changed, and the agents and analysts and computer scientists will go to work every day and continue to protect our country. Leadership changes. It's changed in the FBI, for the last several decades, right? But the mission hasn't changed. And like you said, the people of the FBI will show up every day and do that job and continue to do it no matter who's in charge.
Tim, thank you very much. And should also thank you for all the good work you did at the Bureau, both Washington and Newark. It's good to see you. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
A House divided. MAGA meltdown. The Speaker will fall. The pundits barked, and they got it all wrong. What today's Speaker of the House vote says about the power of the incoming president. Back to our breaking news. 1 week from tonight, Donald Trump may head from Mar-a-Lago to New York for his sentencing in the Stormy Daniels business records case. Ahead of it, there's going to be endless and breathless reporting about how it will weaken Trump, blah, 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 blah. He will be the first convicted felon as president, blah, blah, blah. In fact, the judge who is going to sentence him admitted there's nothing he can do for him. He's not even telling Donald Trump he has to show up. So there you go. Much like cable news predicted a kneecapping of the Trump presidency before it began, they're going to do the same thing. In case you missed it, Republicans in the House re-elected House Speaker Mike Johnson on the first ballot. It's a non-news event. Trump endorsed Johnson in the race with razor-thin margins, but there is nothing people in Washington love more than hyping up the potential demise of Trump.
The fact that Donald Trump has to come in at the 11th hour here to push Mike Johnson over the finish line, it also suggests that he just doesn't have the same kind of push and pull with MAGA world that he once did.
I think for them to undermine this on the opening day is almost suicidally stupid.
It's all a bridge to nowhere. I mean, all these people voting no, voting present. To what end is the Republican Party doing this?
Shortly after all of that, Trump called a few of the last holdouts. They voted for Mike Johnson. He is the Speaker on the first ballot, as speakers have been over decades. Joining us in a moment, Lauren Wright, Chris Hahn. We start with NewsNation's Kelly Meyer in Washington with exactly how Trump flexed his muscle. Good evening, Kelly.
Good evening, Leland. Well, you know, Trump signed his name to those COVID checks, remember? And I thought maybe he should sign his name to this gavel because he really helped Speaker Johnson, get across the finish line. As you mentioned, there were those two Republican holdouts, Ralph Norman and Self, and they went off the floor and they spoke with Trump. We know that Nancy Mace called up Trump. We know that Susie Wiles was on the phone with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And he stepped in and essentially got them to get across the finish line, to go back in there, change their vote, and get him through on that first vote, essentially. I was just trying to check in with Ralph Norman. I have his contact from covering him over the years. He isn't, it seems like his phone's off. Maybe he's flying back to South Carolina, but wondering exactly what Trump said to him to get him to change his mind. But it does show the power of Trump on this first hurdle here in the House. But there are those tight margins going forward. But it does show more about Trump potentially than it does about Johnson in this moment. Leland?
Yeah. Again, now, Trump 2-0 today. Kelly, thank you very much. Lauren Wright, Associate Research Scholar, Lecturer in Politics, Princeton University. Chris Hahn is also with us, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Hope you both had a happy new year. Hahn, maybe not as happy of a new year now. I'm going to start with you, right? This is the judge that was going to put Trump in jail. Liberals loved him. He hated Donald Trump. And even he admitted today, Trump doesn't even have to show up, going to basically dismiss the case. Is it time for people to change how they are talking in the Democratic Party about the resistance?
Yes, it is definitely time. We have to remember one very important thing. Politics does not matter to Donald Trump anymore. He will never stand for election again. So how do we motivate him to do things that are good for the country, that we may all agree on? Can we find that common ground? And when there is a place that he oversteps what, traditional values of America are, then we push back on it. But let's try to find the common ground as often as we can. As for this New York case, it's a nothing burger, right? I mean, when I read this earlier this afternoon, I was like, all right, great. He doesn't have to show up. There's no sentence. They're not even going to find him. So what's the deal here? Let's just throw it out.
Yeah, it seems to be this sort of admission by this judge that this whole thing was, I don't want to say a joke, but was a joke. Lauren, what is the psychology, of this hyperventilating? This is going to be the moment Trump's going to fail. This is going to bring Trump down. And it never does, and yet nobody ever learns.
Well, these are, you're right, unlearned lessons. And so the trap for Democrats that I see them falling into right now, and I saw in the Jeffries House floor speech today, was they will latch on to everything controversial Trump does, and there will be a lot of controversial stuff, whether it's his nominees. He's promised this deportation plan that's very popular among Americans, but the implementation is a totally different story. And so they'll run after every shiny object. And in the meantime, they're not forming their own agenda and having a reality check with the American people about why they got absolutely destroyed in November. That's the problem Trump poses for Democrats.
Well, and they're sort of caught, right? Democrats are kind of caught in this space of Joe Biden still being president, which I think they wish he wasn't. Kamala Harris, who is the vice president, and for all intents and purposes, the standard bearer, she was the nominee. She's the leader of the party come January 21st. Here was her swearing in new senators as she gave the Pledge of Allegiance. Take a listen.
Please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Democrats just can't catch a break. You guys can't even get the pledge right.
Oh, come on. Give her a break, man. It's been a long year. It's been a rough couple of months.
She wanted to be the president of the United States. You don't get breaks. When was the last time you gave Donald Trump a break?
She's not going to be the president of the United States. She just spent $1 billion trying to become president of the United States, and she lost. So give her a break on messing up one word in the pledge. Please. Give her a break.
Okay. Well, all right. You know, Han, you make a valiant case. It is nice to see both of you. Lauren, Chris, always fun. We'll talk soon. A lot more about Donald Trump and those first two weeks now of him, or last 2 weeks as president-elect, the first days of him as president in War Notes. We had 2 weeks off from War Notes. That is our daily newsletter. Comes out every afternoon at 4 p.m. You get an inside look at our thoughts on the biggest stories of the day. There's also some thoughts on my hair in Monday's newsletter. Warnotes.com to subscribe for free. See you on social media at Leland Vittert. The Surgeon General says, stay sober or die from cancer. It's a pleasant New Year's greeting. What happened to all those studies that said red wine was good for us?
More reason to raise a glass. A new study showing that drinking a glass of red wine is just as good as spending an hour at the gym.
A new study finds red wine can improve heart health of people with type 2 diabetes.
But I think it improves heart function. I think that it can be good to decrease inflammation. It may even decrease certain kinds of cancer.
It lowers blood pressure, lowers stress, and overall just has many, many health benefits.
Forget dry January, it's time to drink up. All those wonderful things about wine may or may not be true. Who really knows? Today, the U.S. Surgeon General poured a glass of very cold water, rubbing alcohol on all that. He issued a warning about alcohol, wine included. It causes cancer. He claims it contributes to 100,000 cases of cancer a year and 20,000 deaths. Not just any cancer, 7 of the worst kind: mouth, throat, voice box, esophagus, breast, liver, colon, and rectal. Now there's talks of warning labels like the kinds we find on cigarettes on a wine bottle coming to your store. Joining us now, Dr. Drew Pinsky, Chief Medical Board Member of the wellness company TWC Health. Dr. Drew, good to see you. I don't believe in coincidences. The Friday after New Year's, the administration is about to change. It's information that's essentially already out there, and somehow this is the day the Surgeon General says, time for a new warning about alcohol.
Yeah, I agree. There must be a reason. But look, This whole conversation, more than anything else, reminds us that the news business should stay out of medical reporting. Science is an ever-evolving process, and it can only answer highly specific, very narrow questions. And the studies that were being quoted initially about wine were in diabetics, whether or not cardiac health could maybe be enhanced. Maybe there was resveratrol in there, maybe one glass of wine. It did not improve overall survival. No studies have ever shown alcohol improving overall survival. It shows maybe decreasing the risk of certain cardiac events. Maybe. But that says nothing about overall survival. I have been screaming about this for 30 years. Alcohol is one of the only commonly used drugs in this world that happens to be a carcinogen to almost every tissue in our body. It's the only drug from which the withdrawal is not uncommonly fatal. You don't die of fentanyl withdrawal. You do die of alcohol withdrawal. It does happen quite a bit. And we've just left alcohol behind. Now, I'm not into the nanny state, taking our hand and putting big labels on alcohol. We're grown-ups. We can decide whether or not we want to use a substance or not. But the fact that this is a headline and the fact that that was a headline is all egregious to me.
Okay, a couple of things there. Number one, I can explain why alcohol has been left behind on all the drugs that you talk about, which is the money that comes from the beer, the wine, and the liquor industry, and lobbying can do an awful lot. In Washington, this feels a little bit like the Surgeon General almost trying to bully people into dry January. Do you read it the same way?
Yeah, well, it's he wants to leave his mark before he departs. And this is, to me, and here's the thing about this that is so astonishing. Here's how he's leaving his mark. Hey, everybody in the medical community, did you know the sky is blue? The sky is blue. And I think we got to make sure our patients know that the sky is blue. This is so matter of fact. And again, they were talking about colorectal cancer and breast cancer, especially in obese patients. It's more complicated than just the alcohol. The head and neck cancers and the esophageal cancers are in people with HPV in addition to smoking. That's where you get the cancers. So it's a complicated landscape. It is for us, the medical community, to worry about and to educate our patients about the choices they make.
Fair enough. I was talking to my dad about this today. We were out at the golf course, and he does not drink, and he knows that I enjoy a glass of wine or two at times. And he goes, did you see the big study? I said, well, we're talking to Dr. Drew about it today. And I said, Dad, other than playing golf, what doesn't cause cancer? And then I corrected myself. I said, golf's outdoors. You're in the sun. Sun may cause cancer.
100%.
Eating sugar, right, causes cancer. At some point, is it getting a little silly when we say, as you say, the sky's blue, we're all adults, we all have choices to make about how we are going to spend our years on this earth, and all those choices come with risks?
Yes, and we have skipped past that place quite some time ago in the name of safety uber alles, being taken care of by somebody out there, somebody in a bureaucracy. Look, Vinay Prasad said something the other day. He said, look, if you can bungee jump, you can drink raw milk. The bungee jumping has more risk than the raw milk. What are we doing? Safety uber alles is, and I always remind you, Robespierre's committee that brought the terror of the guillotine was called the Committee for Public Safety, to create more safety for the public. We don't need it. Life is dangerous. We're biological beings. It's okay that we are biological and that certain things happen to us across our lifespan. We should celebrate every second we have and not sit to live under glass. And that is so, when I see these guys trying to live forever, that's not living. My dad was an old family practitioner.
Yeah, no, it's wild.
And he would just say, look, I smoke a little cigarette. I know it's not the greatest thing, this, that, but I want to enjoy my life. I want to live. And living has been taken a backseat to safety uber alles. And it is a woeful state for humans to be in that suspended animation.
I think it's a great point. I'm going to give you the last minute here. RFK is coming in, if he's confirmed as Health and Human Services Secretary. It's a fine line, though, between the nanny state, right? Because there's food colorings, there's all these additives that in Europe they ban in the name of health. Ultra-processed foods obviously are not nearly as good for you as, regular healthy stuff that you buy, fresh fruits, vegetables, on and on and on, make at home. I happen to love Sour Patch Kids. So the question is, In what line do you have warning labels? Do you warn? Do you ban versus letting people make their own decisions?
The problem is, in my humble opinion, when you really get down to what's missing, is transparency. There are all sorts of mandates handed down from on high, food pyramid, and no one discussing how they arrived at that or what influences were in on that or what other choices are out there. Why boxes show up in the order they do in the market. You should be able to have access to full transparency. And if you want to eat Fruit Loops that are not good for you, hopefully there'd be some options out there where there are better things for you. But good, I am all about.
You're naming my favorite foods, Doc.
The one thing I do worry about on the agricultural side is that, these businesses are the way they are for a reason. We got to be very careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But if we just go behind the curtain and what the influences are and how choices are made, I think that will alert people to being a little more cautious with their daily meals.
Yeah, you want to scare Washington. Transparency when it comes to the studies on sugar, the studies on alcohol. Both groups that spend an awful lot of money on lobbying. Dr. Drew, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you. Welcome to 2025.
Here we go. Happy New Year. Good to see you.
All right, Joe Biden. Yeah, you too. Joe Biden will spend the next 2 weeks telling you why Trump is going to kiss up to Vladimir Putin. Not so fast. Why the pundits are all wrong. And Donald Trump's big stick diplomacy, well, new evidence that may lead to Russia's undoing. President Biden promised to spend the last 2 weeks in office Trump-proofing his legacy. Nowhere is that more evident than Ukraine, where he almost weekly promises more aid and more money to Kyiv, more weapons deliveries. They will run right up until the time he leaves office. A new article in the UK Telegraph argues the biggest threat to Putin's regime is Donald Trump. Flip the pundits on their head. It's written by Ambrose Evans Pritchard. Trump's advisors have persuaded him by the odd Socratic method that shapes policy at Mar-a-Lago that a shabby America retreat from Ukraine would be orders of magnitudes worse than Biden's humiliation in Afghanistan. And also that the first line of defense against China lays in the Donbass. That's the eastern part of Ukraine. With us now, retired four-star general of the United States Air Force, former Supreme Allied Commander, Allied Forces Europe and of NATO, General Phil Breedlove. It's good to see you, sir. As always, I'm almost thinking this might work, especially because Donald Trump seems far more willing to sanction Russia's oil industry than Joe Biden ever was.
Yeah, I see a lot of promise here, Leland. Mr. Trump, former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, we've been told, had a conversation with Mr. Putin and sort of laid a few things down to sort of pave the way ahead. And one of those was, don't accelerate this war. And within days, Mr. Putin went into the Kursk region with North Korean troops. And in the next week, he launched 3 of the largest nighttime drone raids of the war. And so I think Mr. Putin has made a mistake that will also move Mr. Trump along to maybe a little more stringent approach to Mr. Putin and Russia.
The argument here, Trump is more willing to hurt Russia's economy. Trump's surrounded by pro-Ukrainian hardliners, which he is. You think about Mike Waltz and certainly Marco Rubio's sex state. Trump may use sanctions on oil and gas and commodities. Trump also doesn't have the vulnerability domestically in the United States because he can sanction Russia's oil and gas industry, and he is not beholden to the climate change folks here in the U.S. You don't do politics, but you just said there's lots of promise. Why is nobody talking about that in the national security world?
Well, I think we've all been watching the narrative that our president-elect has had about NATO, Russia, and Ukraine. And it started in a very different place, say, 2 months ago or 3 months ago during the height of the campaign. But as we approach that point where the president will be in charge again, his approach has seemed to stiffen a bit. And as I said, Mr. Putin is hurting himself. Plus, as you said, I mean, our president-elect is strong on understanding the economy and the use of economic tools. And while Mr. Putin tries to show the world that he's strong and his economy is okay, we all know that it is not. He is vulnerable. And our president-elect knows how to take him to task in those kinds of tools.
This is from President Zelensky on Donald Trump. He's very strong and unpredictable, and I would really like to see President Trump's unpredictability apply to Russia. I believe he really wants to end the war. There's an interesting thing about Vladimir Putin, right? George W. Bush looked into his soul at Crawford, thought he figured him out. Putin embarrassed him. Same with Barack Obama. Same, frankly, with Joe Biden. Is Putin really that good, or do American presidents, perhaps sans Donald Trump, always just want to fall into the same trap?
Well, I think it's a little of both. I hate to speak out both sides of my mouth. Mr. Putin is a smart man. Those people who don't understand that are, I think, at a deficit in their conversation. He is sly like a fox, and he knows how to manipulate and use not only nice words, but not nice words as he tries to manipulate a person. And all American presidents want to come in making it better and trying to find peace with our big opponents. And so we sort of all start out that way. I would just offer to shorten up here that I think the difference with President Trump is he's been a president before, and he knows how people negotiate. He wrote a book where a chapter was all about how to start negotiations. And I think Mr. Trump will see through Mr. Putin this round a little more. Mr. Putin's actions across this war in Ukraine are horrendous. And I think our president has come to know that.
Yeah, and Donald Trump does not like to be embarrassed, and is quite vengeful, might be the right word, when he feels like he might be. General Breedlove, we got to leave it. It's good to see you, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Happy New Year.
And to you, sir. We head to Brian Enton in for Chris Cuomo in New Orleans after the terror attack.